They knew the power of that place. They feared it.
Drinking to excess. I never used to do it.
Adaptation bari huya. Washin no sunday ruku.
From what some critics are calling the best Stephen King adaptation to date to a portrait of poverty without pity in today's Britain. Welcome to our weekly film show. And we're joined in the studio by our film critic Emma Jones. Hello, Emma. Nice to have you here. Now, we're starting with a horror classic that's getting an update. Pet Sematary is considered to be Stephen King's scariest novel, isn't it?
It is, yes. And I think with a maestro like Stephen King in his writing, it can be really hit and miss what happens with film adaptations. You might remember Carrie from a few years back didn't go so well. On the other hand, It, which was written by Cary Fukunaga, that got a lot better reviews. I think the thing with Pet Sematary is there's already a really good version from 1989 available. It was directed by Mary Lambert and written by Stephen King himself. Now, once you've seen this new version, which has been co-directed by horror aficionados Kevin Colson and Dennis Widmyer, you might think, well, the first one wasn't broke. Why did we try to fix it? You probably know the plot of Pet Sematary, which is the Creed family moved from Boston to the countryside. Their house is on an Indian reservation, and the local kids hold very creepy funerals for their dead pets. But this is going to come in handy when the Creed family feline Church is found dead.
OK, well, let's take a look at this. This is from Pet Sematary, the moment when Church is found dead.
We think Church ran away, sweetheart.
Yeah.
He didn't run away.
Well,
He was outside my window last night. Look, he's right there.
Creepy dead animals, lovely. If you're a fan of the book or the original film, should you go and see this?
You probably should give it a go, yes. And I'll tell you what is good about it, in my opinion, is that the performances. Jason Clarke, who you may know from Mudbound, for example, I think he gets better and better. He is a great actor, and he really carries the role of Louis Creed. The real star of the show, however, is veteran actor John Lithgow, who brings a depth to creepy neighbour Judd that a lesser actor, they just couldn't manage. So these performances elevate the film. I think it also deals very well with that fear that parents have of what can happen to their children. It also deals very well, I think, with the idea, should death be final? But it has got a few jumpy moments, but it's really been made as horror for the masses. So I think if you truly love horror films, then I think you should stick with the 1989 version.
OK, that sounds like more my cup of tea. Horror for the masses. OK, next, Ray and Liz is the directing debut by the Turner Prize nominee Richard Billingham. Is it a classic British kitchen sink drama?
Well, it's certainly a stunning debut that has done extremely well at festivals. It's a tiny independent British film. Now, Richard Billingham first became famous in the UK about 20 years ago when he released some photos of his heavy drinking father, Ray, and his chain-smoking mum, Liz. So when he followed in the footsteps of someone like Steve McQueen, who also made the transition from being an artist into film, he made an intensely autobiographical film. So Ray and Liz is about Ray and Liz. It's set in the 80s. They live in a tiny, cramped council flat in the Midlands with their two sons, one of whom is called Richard, and a vicious family lodger.
It's also set in Birmingham, which is from my hometown. Let's take a look at the family dynamic in Ray and Liz.
Yeah, there's a load of drink hidden in this house.
Shut up, Ray.
Yeah.
In this house?
Oh, yeah. Vodka, brandy, you name it. All paid for.
It's hidden and hidden good. I bought it with Ray's redundancy money, and I don't want you touching a drop of it. In fact, if you even think about looking for it, you see this?
probably loved the accents there, I would imagine. A bit of nostalgia for you.
A bit of nostalgia.
Now, I'd say if you're an Andrea Arnold fan, this film is probably for you. It's more her kind of tone rather than Ken Loach himself, because this film isn't really about the poverty and the squalor that they live in. It's not even a narrative, to be honest with you. It's a series of snapshots set in the present day as well as in the 80s about what leads to their family breakdown. Now, Billingham has shot the film in boxed-in 16mm, which works really effectively. It really conveys the claustrophobia and the fact that this family is really imprisoned in their circumstances. Justin Salinger and Ella Smith play the 80s Ray and Liz, and Ella Smith, I should mention, fantastic performance. This is a really hard watch, but then if you remember, Steve McQueen's debut Hunger was as well, and it could be really interesting to see what Richard Billingham does next.
All right, then I'm going to put Ray and Liz on my list.
Okay.
Now onto a film that was at Cannes Directors Fortnight last year, Birds of Passage by Cira Guerra and Cristina Gallego. Now, they were behind Embrace the Serpent a few years earlier. Does this live up to that critical hit?
Well, I think it surpasses Embrace of the Serpents. It's one of my favourite films of the last year. It's beautiful to watch, and it's got a really interesting plot about how the Wayuu people, who are an indigenous tribe in Colombia, become involved with the fledgling drugs industry in Colombia in the 1970s. Now, at the start of the film, Rapaye, played by Jose Acosta, wants to marry a woman called Zaida. Now, they're both Wayuu, and it's going to cost a lot in a dowry of sheep and goats. So maybe we could see a clip of the film where they're embracing their courtship. That's courtship Wayuu style. Now, Rapaye stumbles upon the discovery he can raise the dowry by actually selling marijuana to the American hippies who were down in Colombia for the Peace Corps. And so within a few scenes, drugs, cars, money, they've all come to this indigenous culture.
So why do you think this film is so powerful?
It just works on a lot of levels. If you strip it down, essentially it's a mafia-esque film about a family at war. I think it's got echoes of Gomorrah or even a classic TV series like The Sopranos, for example. The Wayuu's culture, the tribe, family, relationships, they all completely break down faced with the temptation of money. And I think one of the most surreal parts of the film is this grand palace this family builds for itself in the middle of nowhere with all the drugs money. They sit ensconced on near thrones, and yet they sleep in hammocks at night because that is part of their culture, and they're really trying to transition between the two. It's not an issue film about the death of an indigenous culture. It truly is, again, about family breakdown, just in a totally different way. It's very watchable at the same time as being pure art house, and to me, it's a nearly perfect film.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
okay,
loved it. Absolutely loved it.
On to something a bit different now. Many parents do it, say to their young children that they can live at home forever. A French film, Tanguy, from 2001, took this literally when 28 years later, their son is still at home with them. The film became cult and is now synonymous with adults who still live with their parents. There's surely some of you watching out there. Now, nearly 20 years on, a sequel has been made, and this chap is back home at age 44. Now, these sort of sequels don't happen often in France, do they?
No, it's really strange, actually. It's taken nearly 20 years to do this sequel, especially as the director Etienne Châtillers, he hasn't exactly made a huge amount of films ever since he made the first Tanguy back in 2001. And to recap, Tanguy, I guess, became part of popular culture. It was such a hit in 2001, and to do a Tanguy was to totally overstay your welcome with your parents when you should have long since flown the nest. And that was Tanguy in his 20s. Now, as you said, he's in his 40s, and he moves back in with his bourgeois parents after his wife leaves him. Just like the first Tanguy, the plot centres around his parents, played by Sabine Azima and André Dussolier, and their increasingly crazy attempts to just get rid of him, just so he can leave the house.
OK, do you think this is going to be as big a hit as the 2001 version?
I don't think it's going to be such a huge cultural landmark. I do think it's going to be a crowd pleaser, though. And I do have to ask the question, why? Because we learn no more about Tanguy as a character in this one than we did in the first one. He is basically as flat as an ironing board as a character. He's just useless, basically, and it's more irritating when he's in his 40s than when he's in his 20s. Added to which, Tanguy, who you may remember married a Chinese wife, has a daughter. She has a boyfriend, and it gives rise to a lot of jokes about Asian stereotypes that I didn't find at all funny, personally. I think the saving grace is really Papa and Maman and their desperate attempts, basically, to get their home back. And one more thing which I found very interesting and a great contrast to 2001, it still gives up this huge bourgeois lifestyle, retirement, basically, as something that's, fine for Papa and Maman, but for people under 50, they can't aspire to that lifestyle anymore. I just wonder how that's going to play in modern-day France.
OK, interesting. Emma, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to leave you with Tanguy too. Remember our website, we're also on Twitter and Facebook. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
Devinez qui revient à la maison.
Je t'aime, maman.
Moi aussi, mon chéri.
Et je t'aime, papa.
Moi aussi, mon poulet.
Promis?
Promis.